It is week one, our very first Patreon video of the season. We've got a new studio,
Looks great.
courtesy of David Newman. It's
I
it's
gotta say.
fantastic. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. And so we are going to take a look at the run defense against the Lions because that was really the concerning part of the game. And really, I think even I was left wondering why, for a team that spent a lot of resources on the defensive line and has an all-pro linebacker and linebackers that seem to be flying around everywhere, why did they seem to underperform against the Lions team that was able to get chunk plays on the ground at will? We've got 4 plays that detail the issues that the 49ers had in their run fits. And I might post the run fit episode that we had a couple, I think 2 years ago now for scheme month. But remember that there are gaps. Run fits is just really a fancy way of saying there are gaps, and everyone's responsible for a gap. And that really broad concept is something that you'll need to understand at a very, very basic level. We'll walk you through a couple of those things here, but the run fits were not great for the Niners because of a couple of key offenders. And so we're going to start in the first quarter. It is 2nd and 10. It is a run play after an incomplete pass, our favorite, but the Lions are able to execute this split zone play effectively.
Yeah, so we'll kind of let it run, from the sideline here so you can get an idea what's coming. And then really we get to the good stuff once you get to the end zone view here. So, yeah, split zone meaning we're essentially going to have the offensive line, as you can see, all kind of moving the same direction, right? So they're going to be zone blocking here to the right. You can see them all kind of moving in unison. But then you see the tight end coming across, right? And he's going to end up looking to get a cut on Bosa there. So that's your split zone action, right? You're basically trying to split the
keyword looking to get one.
Yeah. I mean, good enough is what we call that. But yeah, as you can see, and we'll kind of pause it here in the really bad spot, right? You have this huge hole for them to be able to run through. And so a few things happen here in order for that to happen. So a lot of times what you're going to see when from a defensive perspective, when teams go to split zone, right, is your linebackers are actually going to have to like bump back a gap, right? So right now you can see just from alignment, Dre Greenlaw is in the A gap there, right? He's between the center and the right guard. And then you've got Fred Warner that's in the B gap there between the left guard and the left tackle. And so what'll happen is once they read that split zone action, they're going to all kind of slide down and find the next gap because the offense is essentially removing a gap on the right side of the line and they're adding it over to the left. So the defense has to be able to account for that and kind of shift. And the player that doesn't really get there is barely on the screen right now is Jaquiski Tartt. So you can kind of see his arm there, and then here he comes into screen. So you can see Greenlaw, right? Greenlaw and Warner both, okay, they see it, and now they bump back, and they're fitting into these gaps here on the backside. And so the gap here that we're getting between Kerr and Greenlaw is really where Jaquiski Tartt should be because he no longer needs to stay outside, right? Because that tight end is gone. So now Armstead is really the guy that has the outside most gap here, so he can slide back in. So we don't get that. We get Zach Kerr getting, washed down there, and suddenly you get a giant hole to run through.
Yeah, Zach Kerr is going to be a name, unfortunately, that you'll remember. It's not opening up well for whom I thought may be a value signing for the 49ers. But we get to the next play. Later in the same drive, it is now 1st and 10, and the Lions hit the 49ers with a power play, the Dan Campbell special, that goes for some success as well. And it, again, is because of defensive line and linebackers.
Yeah, so we see the interior of the defensive line, again, kind of being problematic. One thing they do is, so if you're paying attention, we don't get to see the motion here from the end zone view, but if you were paying attention on the sideline view, you see Penei Sewell is actually moved over and is now at tight end. So they kind of go unbalanced with their offensive line here, and they've got a tight end really lined up at left tackle, and they've got Sewell over there where you would expect a tight end to be. And so they're going to run power that direction. And again, we get a couple things here. So first, we get this motion that comes across, and what this does, if I back it up really quick, you'll see, so Jason Verrett, right, is also going to play a factor here. So he's kind of initially starting there. Once that receiver goes across, right, he doesn't have any wide threat there. And the tight end again that's there is I don't believe he should be eligible on this play now that he's lined up as a tackle. And so yeah, he is basically going to be now needing to hang out here because he's not in man coverage, right? He doesn't follow the receiver across the field in motion. They're just going to be playing in their cover 3 here. And so he also needs to get in the fit there because he has no like immediate receiving threats to his side. So you have that. And then you've got Givens. So Givens is going to be number 90 there in the middle. And he kind of takes a path that's a high risk, high reward type of path, right? So he tries to kind of undercut the center's back block here, which can work, right? He kind of makes the center look dumb here for a minute, but it also is a longer path to get to the back. And so it's one of those things that if you do that, you better get there because otherwise this type of thing happens, right? You leave a lot of space that's available there. So normally you would expect that player to kind of move across the face of the center so that he can condense that space a little bit more. So between those two things, that's again how you end up with another big hole there for the Lions back to get through.
Run fits are hard because whenever you have one person who does that kind of move where they're trying to undercut and maybe they think they can get around the offensive lineman, but they ultimately end up creating a larger hole for that back to get through. And when you couple that with what was happening to Zach Kerr on the double team, where they really collapsed him, I mean, they end up on top of Zach Kerr, then you have a really, really big gap that player can run through. You're about to see Zach Kerr here get double teamed. And so he ends up just here flat on his back. And then you've got the widening of the gap opposite of him. And now it's just a big alley for that running back to run through for what I think is a pretty interesting little run play, going unbalanced and kind of doing some things to the 49ers defense and their run fits. Good scheme, I think, all around from the Lions on that play. Then we get to the second quarter. There's another split zone play, and it's a 1st and 10 play. And the next 2 plays are going to be plays the Lions run back to back. But the split zone just gave the Niners some problems, especially early in the game.
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned, with that the Lions did a good job with scheme, and I think that's really the case on this as well. They're doing some good things with motion that make it difficult. So as we saw right from the sideline, we're going to get this receiver that comes in motion here. And what that does is pull Jaquiski Tart out of the play, right? So he has to kind of follow this motion here in case that guy's going to go out for a route. We don't want to leave him wide open down the field. And so that pulls him out of this space that the back ends up getting to, right? So the back ends up, you see, I mean, we were talking a lot about who's doing a poor job, and it's mostly the guys on the interior, but Eric Armstead right here basically just stands up this tackle, and you can see like how far ahead everybody else kind of moves past him. And that's not how it's supposed to look, right? From an offense's perspective, like they want to keep this same sort of spacing that you're getting right here after the snap. They just kind of want to move the whole picture that direction. And Armstead is just like, nope. So the back basically immediately after he gets it is having to look to cut back. And so again, though, we get the first thing we look at is the defensive tackles here. And Jonah Jackson, who's the left guard for Detroit, I think did a very good job against the 49ers interior. And so we see him here again on Zach Kerr, just driving him well down out of the picture. And then you get, Greenlaw here that isn't great necessarily. Like I think, he could be a little bit more aggressive, but really the guy that we're missing, right, and that's needs to be fitting in the space is Jaquiski Tart. Like, and it's not that he's wrong or that I would say he's bad on this play. This is one where I think they really do scheme it up well and end up, just doing a good job at removing him from the picture so that they can create this space. But yeah, you see the combination of good scheme from the Lions and then, some guys that are getting beat up front for the 49ers, and you have another huge gap to run through.
And then finally, we get to the play immediately after this play. And this is a counter play, that looks weird. It has a lot of interesting features, we'll say, to the counter run, but ultimately it is just a counter run that breaks for another long run that Jimmy Ward has to end up stopping. And while Jimmy Ward wasn't perfect this game, he certainly is very, very good at being the last line of defense, and he does bring players to the ground when it's one-on-one tackling. So thankfully, number one is back there. But this is an interesting play, again, that also pops big because of what's happening on that front.
Yeah, so you see with counter, you're usually looking for two pullers, right? So in this case, it's going to be the center is one of those, and then the tight end that's on the inside most, that's a little bit set off the line, number 88 there, is going to be the second one. So you see those guys both pulling. What makes it a little unusual is it almost looks like the back side of this play, so the right side of the offensive line is kind of more zone blocking, which you wouldn't typically expect from a counter play. It may just be an adjustment that they had to kind of specific to this front or whatever. But yeah, ultimately you're getting the little counter step here from the back where he's going to fake right, and then we're going to move it back left. And so, yeah, I think, again, you get a combination of movement up front, right, on the interior of the defensive line. And Zach Kerr again here, that's going to get moved backwards by Penei Sewell, and that's going to create some space. And then we see the linebackers not doing a great job at adjusting to, again, kind of the moving gaps that you have to deal with here on these gap scheme plays. And so you end up with Fred Warner here, who obviously we talk a lot of great things about Fred Warner, specifically in pass coverage, but yeah, in run defense here, not great. It gets sealed inside. And so again, you just have a gap left unattended and another big hole for the runner to get through.
One thing that I did notice more specifically in this game than I have perhaps in others is that the linebackers don't seem to move towards the line of scrimmage when they read run. And you know that they read run, they start bumping gaps, but they don't move forward. I'm going to have to keep an eye on this, and I might even look at some of the last season stuff because I don't know if they're specifically coached to do that. It would make sense if they were. My hope is that D'Amico Ryans is like, don't get sucked up on play action. Basically, don't take 2 steps up. If you end up giving an extra yard or 2 in the run game, that's okay, because I'd much rather you do that than I would let, kind of have you open up a bigger window behind you because you've taken 2 steps forward. So I have no idea if that's the case. I'm going to see how they play it and how they have played it in the past, because I think that piece at least is super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I also have not paid super close attention to that specifically, but I do know, like, watching, every week all of the pass plays that they're doing defensively, like they're typically very good at getting back on those play action in coverage, right? So when you get the play action stuff, I mean, you consistently see Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw getting back there and kind of finding those crossers and finding those routes that tend to give a lot of teams problem with the play action stuff. So yeah, I think it would be unusual if that was the case, but I think in a good way. And I think, yeah, that would be a pretty cool thing to see, because that's one of the things that I think you need to see from defenses, right, to stop this stuff is they can't really stick with the same rules that they've always been using, because obviously offenses are just taking advantage of those.
Well, I think that does it for this week's edition of the Patreon video, the scheme breakdown of the 49ers run game against the Lions. We've got the Eagles coming up next. We'll see what comes for the next video. If you guys have any questions, make sure that you drop them in the comments of the video. Let us know, ask us on the Patreon. We'll happily get to them and answer those questions and add more detail or more color. And I'll see if I can drop in the Run Fit episode that we did for Scheme a little bit ago, because I think that will also help too.
Yep.
Thanks again to everyone who bought us a beer. And as always, go Niners.